One of the things being discussed over the situation in Ukraine right now is military spending, not just by countries on the border, the Baltic states threatened by this, but by countries in Europe who up until now have been averse to increasing military spending, or at least spending more to stay in NATO, something that Donald Trump actually had talked about when he was president. But we found out today that Germany is one of those countries who have been up until now averse to not only upping their military spending, but to helping other countries out with lethal weaponry as well. Well, they announced they would increase military spending there to more than 2% of the country's GDP. That's roughly $113 billion, right? The question then becomes, okay, that's Germany. They're not directly affected by this, even though they are a customer of Russia when it comes to buying oil, but they're not threatened by Russia. What about Canada? What about our military here? We've been sending and announcing now for the past few days is our answer to this, a variety of sanctions. We've also announced we'd be sending help in terms of money directly to Ukraine, but nothing in the way of military help, at least not directly to the Ukrainians. There are Canadian troops who will be on the ground in border states, border countries. But what about the state of our military to begin with? And in view of what's going on in Ukraine, should Canada even consider upping the amount we spend for our military in general? MICHEL W. DRAPEAU is retired from the Canadian Forces, former colonel in the Canadian Forces. He served for 34 years. He's on the line right now. Colonel DRAPEAU, thanks for your time this afternoon.
You're welcome.
I covered a lot of ground in there. I want you to just weigh in on the first thing I asked was, even though we are clearly not threatened here by this, and we are supporting Ukraine, of course, what about our military? Is this the kind of thing that makes people sit back and go, wait a sec, maybe we should take a look at how we, in fact, are supporting our military here and whether we need to be spending more money or not?
I think you're bang on, spot on. I think every NATO country should relook at its plans, its ability to mobilize, and whether or not, in fact, they have sufficient armed forces ready. And the kind of war that we're facing with now, you have to come with what you got. So if they're not in, if you don't have the weaponry up to date in sufficient numbers, and you don't have a sufficiently large and trained military, that you're not able to provide the kind of support that would be expected from you as an ally. So in Canada is probably at its weakest point in decades. I mean, the maximum military members that we have in the armed forces now is about 65,000. Compare this with what it used to be about 20 years ago. And even then, the Chief of Defense Staff has said that he is short of roughly about 10,000 recruits that he's not able to have in to replenish the ranks. So it's a wake-up call, and Canada, as Germany and as every other nation, including the United States, have to up their game and to make sure, in fact, we spend more on defense to be able to, if nothing else, to serve as a deterrent to Russia, so they understand that the Western countries and NATO countries everywhere are capable and willing and ready to deploy as when required. That includes, obviously, Canada.
And do you think there's a willingness to do that here?
Well, as everything, sometimes you need a wake-up call. I don't think militarily there was this kind of sense of urgency, and politically I don't think it was part of the program. And we spend in Canada all kind of money on social program, which is welcome and never quite enough. But at the same time, we have a long coast, we have naval interests, and we certainly have an interest in what's taking place at the moment and what could potentially take place in decades to come. So I think we're not going to get a second warning. This is as big a strategic warning as we would expect, and Russia is not going to get away anytime soon. They will continue to be a menace, a threat, and we have China, which is growing in size and growing in importance and growing in its presence everywhere. So there is, in fact, more than enough strategic warning for Canada, in fact, to up its game, and I think time is of the essence.
Do you think, then, as someone who served in the military and knows the apparatus of the Canadian military, that what we're doing now to support Ukraine is enough, given what's going on there right now?
Well, it is enough, if only because that's all we can afford. We don't have the means to mobilize much more of what we have at the moment. We have any a number of other commitments at the same time. So when we look at the 65,000 and we break it down between naval forces, air forces, and land forces, and those that are capable and ready to go with the proper equipment, and do we have the lift, either the sea or the airlift to do so? And at the moment, there is no agreement to deploy NATO forces anywhere, so there's no sense to go any place except be ready to go in case there is a requirement to do so. But certainly in Canada, we need to certainly increase our recruitment, increase our training, and making sure that the necessary hardware is, and it takes quite a bit of time before we can have it, both from a monetary perspective and a manufacturing perspective. It takes a bit of time, even if we were to make the decision today to get sufficient naval and air forces equipment and so on. It's going to take, if not a decade, close to a decade before we would accept delivery of these equipments.
Speaking with MICHEL W. DRAPEAU, former Canadian colonel in the armed forces, I want to get to what you pointed out just a couple of minutes ago, the idea that we're looking at a military in this country that's short, as you said, I think about 10,000 people. What is it, do you believe, that is keeping people from wanting to join the military here? Is it the bad publicity over the years, the scandals that have been involved in our military, or what do you think it's coming from?
Well, I mean, the people we want to have in the forces are young recruits. In tradition, that's what we do. We are now recruiting, it's kind of strange, but we are recruiting people in their 50s. And you kind of wonder whether or not this is the way to go, or if this is indicative of an issue that we have as to why is it that we're not being able to attract, and it's not for a lack of paying good salaries and allowances, which we are, and a very interesting and noble calling. I think some of it has to do with what you mentioned, the kind of scandal, the kind of diminished leadership capability that we seem to have. I mean, we need to up our game in that particular field. We need to have an officer corps that, in fact, lives up to its potential and can offer the young people a challenge and a good example as to service to the nation itself. But at the same time, also, the military has got to be more present and more effective, and certainly more deployable in the wake of the Afghan mission, where we spent an awful lot of time and efforts and training and so on and so forth, preparing for this mission, which is long gone. I think in some ways, we've turned our back certainly to peacekeeping mission, but over the past little while, we've turned our back from the NATO commitment. I mean, we've left NATO, our forces in Germany in 1993, so that's it's a long time ago, and it still should be one of our primary tasks, and we should be equipped and we should be ready to make those commitments.
You know, I'm wondering, as someone who was in the military for as many years as you were, whether you think the appetite, the public appetite for trying to spend more money on our military is something that would be difficult to sell to Canadian voters.
It might have been difficult to sell, the week before last, but now I think even if you don't keep up with public affairs, you cannot escape the thing that is taking place in the Ukraine at the moment. You cannot escape the danger, the danger of massive use of weapons by Russia, who was unafraid to speak language of the possibility of the use of nuclear weapons and so on and so forth. I think, if nothing else, this will bring the attention of the public in Canada, as it does now in Finland and Norway and Germany and some other nations. I think it's a wake-up call, and I think we're going to see an awful lot of nations, peace-loving nations such as Canada, that are going to be taking a second look and will rapidly, rally to the call of the drum to say that we need to spend more, we need to be more ready and more able, in fact, to have a military presence when and where required.
Just as a final question, Colonel DRAPEAU, do you worry, given what you've seen, given the situation in Ukraine right now, that some of these NATO countries, which are now saying they will send lethal weaponry, if this continues or gets even worse than it is now, that these NATO nations would get together and, in fact, send military in to help with the fight?
I don't think so. I think all of the countries that are directly involved, and in fact, when I say directly involved, I'm alluding to Poland among others. They are part of NATO, and NATO has a sense of unity, a sense of solidarity, and they're going to be acting as one. And I hope that doesn't, nothing change to that. But they will, politically, because NATO is first and foremost a political affiliation, they will decide as one what to do, and I think they will refrain from taking any hostile action, any military action, for as long as their borders that extend to certainly Poland, that their border is in any way, shape, or form put at risk. For as long as Russia stays outside of NATO nation, then I don't think NATO will possibly go to war or engage any combat troops, be they air forces or land forces. And I think at the moment, from a strategic perspective, it is the way to do it.
Colonel DRAPEAU, very much appreciate your time and insight today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Colonel Michel W. DRAPEAU, former Canadian Armed Forces Colonel, 34 years. Interesting to hear, how we have lost so many members in our military, simply people not interested in signing up to join anymore.